She had just buried her mother. Alone, scared, and holding on to the last gift she'd ever receive. The young Apache girl had nowhere to go until a stranger stood before her with a promise. But who was he really? And could she trust him? Enough to follow? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. In the harsh terrain of the Arizona Territory, 1887, the sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape as a small funeral procession made its way to a modest burial site on the outskirts of a mixed settlement. 8-year-old Nizhoni stood, motionless, her dark eyes fixed on the wooden coffin being lowered into the dry earth. Her mother, once vibrant and full of life, had succumbed to a fever that had swept through their small Apache community. "May the Great Spirit guide your journey," whispered the elder who conducted the ceremony, his weathered face etched with the wisdom of many winters. Nizhoni remained silent, her small fingers clutching a beaded necklace, the last gift her mother had crafted for her. The air was thick with the scent of sage and pine, carried by a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper condolences to the young girl who now stood alone in the world. "She has no one," a woman's voice murmured from the small gathering. "Her father died in the conflict last winter, and now her mother... The words hung in the air like the dust particles dancing in the sunlight. Nizhoni understood enough English to know what they were saying. She was truly alone. Now no relatives had survived the diseases and conflicts that had decimated her people. As the mourners began to disperse, a tall figure remained, observing from a respectful distance. Thomas Blackwood, a rancher known throughout the territory for his fair dealings with both settlers and natives, had come to pay his respects. He had often traded with Nizhoni's mother, exchanging supplies for the intricate baskets she wove. Nizhoni sat by her mother's grave long after everyone had left. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, but the beauty was lost on the child whose world had collapsed around her. "Little one," a deep voice spoke softly in broken Apache. "Night comes, not good to stay." Nizhoni looked up to see Thomas standing nearby, his hat in his hands, a gesture of respect. "I have nowhere to go," she replied in her native tongue, tears finally breaking through her stoic expression. Thomas knelt beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I knew your mother. She was a good woman, honest and kind." Nizhoni nodded, clutching the beaded necklace tighter. "The settlement council is discussing what to do," Thomas continued, switching to English. "Some talk of sending you to the mission school." Nizhoni's body tensed. She had heard stories of the mission schools, places where children like her were forced to abandon their language, their customs, their very identities. "I won't go," she said firmly, her voice quiet but resolute. Thomas studied her face, seeing determination behind the grief. "You understand English well. My mother taught me. She said knowledge is like having two pairs of eyes instead of one." A smile touched Thomas's weathered face. "Your mother was wise." The rancher stood, gazing at the horizon where his property began, acres of land that had once belonged to tribes like Nizhoni's. The irony wasn't lost on him. "I have a proposition for you, Nizhoni," he said carefully. "I live alone on my ranch. It's a hard life, but honest. I could use help with certain tasks, tending the garden, helping with meals." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "In return, you would have a roof over your head, food in your belly, and no one would force you to forget your people's ways." Nizhoni looked up at him suspiciously. "Why would you do this?" Thomas's eyes clouded with an old memory. "Many years ago, I lost my wife and daughter to the same fever that took your mother. Perhaps the Great Spirit you speak of has brought us together because we both know what it means to be alone." Nizhoni considered his words. The alternative, the mission school, loomed like a shadow in her mind. At least with this man, this stranger who had shown respect to her mother and her customs, she might maintain some connection to her heritage. "I will go with you," she finally said. "But I will visit my mother's grave every week." Thomas nodded. Solemnly, "That's a promise I can help you keep." As they walked toward Thomas's wagon, Nizhoni felt the weight of her mother's absence, like a physical burden. The road ahead stretched into uncertainty, but a tiny spark of hope flickered in the darkness of her grief. "Your mother told me once that your name means beautiful in your language," Thomas said as he helped her onto the wagon seat. Nizhoni nodded, surprised that he remembered. "It suits you," he said simply, before clicking his tongue to set the horses in motion. As the wagon pulled away from the burial ground, Nizhoni looked back one last time at the fresh mound of earth. "I will remember everything, Mother," she whispered in Apache. "Everything you taught me, I promise." The wagon creaked along the dusty trail as twilight deepened around them. Ahead lay the Blackwood Ranch and an uncertain future for the young Apache girl who carried her people's stories in her heart. "We'll arrive before full dark," Thomas said, breaking the silence. "My foreman, Miguel, will have supper waiting. He's a good man from Mexico. His wife, Elena, comes by to help with the housekeeping." Nizhoni listened quietly, trying to imagine this new life. "You'll have your own room," Thomas continued. "It's small, but it's private. It used to belong to ... double quotes his voice trailed off. "Your daughter," Nizhoni finished for him. Thomas nodded, his jaw tight with old grief. "Yes, Sarah was her name. She would have been about 16 now." The wagon rattled over a stone, jostling them both. In the distance, the outline of a substantial ranch house took shape against the darkening sky. "Tomorrow," Thomas said, "we can fetch your belongings from your mother's dwelling." "There isn't much," Nizhoni replied. "Just her baskets and some clothes." "Then we'll bring them all," Thomas promised. "Every last one." The first light of dawn crept through the small window of Nizhoni's new room, casting soft shadows across the unfamiliar space. For a moment, she forgot where she was, expecting to hear her mother's gentle morning song. Reality crashed back as the memory of yesterday's burial resurfaced, leaving a hollow feeling in her chest. A soft knock at the door broke through her thoughts. "Nizhoni, are you awake?" Thomas's voice came through the wooden door. "Elena has prepared breakfast." "I am coming," she replied, quickly folding the blanket that had kept her warm through the night. The Blackwood Ranch house was larger than any dwelling Nizhoni had known. The main room served as both kitchen and dining area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A woman with a kind face and graying hair tied in a bun was setting plates on a solid wooden table. "Buenos dias, Pequega," Elena greeted her with a warm smile. "Come, sit, you must be hungry." Nizhoni slid onto a chair, her feet dangling above the floor. The table was set with food she recognized, beans, tortillas, and eggs, alongside unfamiliar items. "This is bacon," Thomas explained, noticing her curious glance. "And this is maple syrup for the hotcakes. Try a little of everything. Eat what you like." Nizhoni carefully took small portions, watching how Thomas used his utensils and mimicking his actions. Her mother had taught her some settler ways, but meals in their home had been simpler affairs. After breakfast, Thomas said between bites, "I thought we might ride to your mother's dwelling to collect your belongings, as I promised." Nizhoni nodded, grateful for his remembrance. "Thank you." Elena moved efficiently around the kitchen, her presence comforting in this strange new environment. "Thomas tells me you know how to weave baskets, like your mother," she said. "Yes," Nizhoni replied. "She taught me when I was very small." "Perhaps you could show me someday," Elena suggested. "I've always admired Apache basketry." The simple acknowledgement of her skills brought a fleeting smile to Nizhoni's face. "I would like that." After breakfast, Thomas led Nizhoni to the stables where Miguel was already preparing a horse and wagon. "Buenos dias, Miguel," Thomas greeted his foreman. "This is Nizhoni." The Mexican man tipped his hat respectfully. "Welcome to Blackwood Ranch, Senorita. Mr. Thomas is a good man. You will be safe here." Nizhoni nodded shyly, studying the man's weathered face and kind eyes. The journey to her former home was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the small cluster of Apache dwellings, Nizhoni noted how many stood empty now, a testament to the hardships her people had endured. Her mother's wickiup stood slightly apart from the others, its dome-shaped frame covered with brush and canvas. Nizhoni hesitated at the entrance, suddenly afraid to face the emptiness inside. "Would you like me to wait here?" Thomas asked sensitively. "No," she said after a moment. "Please come." Inside, the dwelling was neat and modest. Baskets of various sizes and intricate designs lined one side, testament to her mother's skill. Nizhoni moved methodically, gathering her few clothes and her mother's prized possessions, a silver bracelet, several bone needles, and the tools for basket making. "These are beautiful," Thomas said, carefully examining one of the baskets. "Your mother was truly gifted." "She was teaching me the special patterns," Nizhoni explained, running her fingers over the intricate design. "Each one tells a story. Then we must take them all," Thomas decided, "so you can remember the stories." As they packed the wagon, several members of the remaining Apache community approached. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face lined with the wisdom of many winters. "Child of morning light," she addressed Nizhoni in Apache, using her ceremonial name. "Your mother walks with the ancestors now, but her spirit remains with you." She handed Nizhoni a small leather pouch. "These are seeds from the sacred plants. When spring comes, you will plant them in your new home, and your mother's spirit will find peace." Tears welled in Nizhoni's eyes as she accepted the gift. "Thank you, grandmother." The old woman turned to Thomas, switching to halting English. "You take this child into your home. You must also take our ways into your heart. She is Apache. Never let her forget." Thomas met the elder's gaze steadily. "I give you my word. She will keep her traditions as long as she lives under my roof." The old woman studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then may the Creator watch over your household." The journey back to the ranch was filled with memories, as Nizhoni told Thomas. Stories of her mother, each one bringing both pain and comfort. By the time they returned, the sun was high in the sky. "I have some work to attend to this afternoon," Thomas said as they unloaded the wagon. "Perhaps you could help Elena prepare the evening meal. Tomorrow, I can show you around the ranch properly." Nizhoni agreed, carrying her mother's baskets to her room with reverent care. She arranged them along the wall, creating a familiar space in this new home. Later, in the kitchen, Elena showed patience as she taught Nizhoni how to prepare a stew that combined Mexican and American flavors. "Mr. Thomas," Elena said as she chopped vegetables, "he lost much, you know. His wife, his daughter, they were his whole world. For many years after, he spoke to almost no one. Just worked from sunrise to sunset." Nizhoni listened, recognizing the shared thread of loss that connected her to the rancher. "Why did he help me?" she asked softly. Elena's hands paused in their work. "Perhaps because helping you helps him too. Sometimes, Nina, the Creator brings together broken hearts so they might heal each other." As dusk fell, Thomas returned from his work, bringing with him a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I stopped by the general store," he explained, somewhat awkwardly handing the package to Nizhoni. "I thought you might need some things." Inside, Nizhoni found a new dress, simple but well made, a hairbrush, and a small journal with a pencil. "The dress might be a bit large," Thomas said, "but Elena can help adjust it." "And the journal?" "Well, I thought you might want to write down your mother's stories so they won't be forgotten." Nizhoni ran her fingers over the blank pages, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to express the fullness of her gratitude. That night, after a meal shared in companionable quiet, Nizhoni sat on her bed and opened the journal. On the first page, she carefully wrote in English, "The stories of my mother, Kiona of the Apache people, as remembered by her daughter, Nizhoni." It was a small beginning, but in that moment, it felt like a promise kept. The weeks turned into months as autumn painted the Arizona landscape in muted golds and russets. Nizhoni gradually settled into life at Blackwood Ranch, finding comfort in new routines while honoring old traditions. Every Sunday, true to his promise, Thomas drove her to visit her mother's grave, where she would sit in quiet communion, sometimes speaking softly in Apache, sometimes simply listening to the wind. October brought cooler temperatures and the harvest of the small vegetable garden that Elena had helped Nizhoni plant behind the house. Thomas had built a special shelf in Nizhoni's room where her mother's baskets were displayed, and alongside them now stood several of Nizhoni's own creations, their patterns telling stories of her new life interwoven with memories of the old. "You have your mother's hands," Thomas observed one evening as he watched Nizhoni weaving by the firelight, her fingers moving with practiced precision, skilled and patient. Nizhoni smiled at the compliment. "My mother said that weaving teaches us about life. Each strand must find its place, or the whole basket weakens." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Wise words. He hesitated before continuing. "The town is having its autumn festival next weekend. There will be music, food, games for the children. Would you like to attend?" Nizhoni's hands stilled. She had not ventured into the town since arriving at the ranch, aware of the curious, sometimes hostile glances that native children often received. "Will people mind that I am there?" she asked directly. Thomas's expression grew serious. "Some might. I won't pretend otherwise. But you have as much right to enjoy the festival as anyone else." He leaned forward in his chair. "And you won't be alone. I'll be with you the entire time, as will Elena and Miguel." Nizhoni considered his words. Her mother had always taught her to face challenges with dignity. "I would like to go," she decided. "I will wear the dress Elena helped me make." The day of the festival dawned clear and crisp. Nizhoni dressed carefully in the new outfit, a simple cotton dress with subtle embroidery that Elena had taught her, combined with a traditional Apache beaded necklace that had belonged to her mother. "You look beautiful, Nina," Elena said, helping to brush and braid Nizhoni's long dark hair. "Remember to hold your head high. You are the daughter of proud people." The town square was transformed with colorful bunting and stalls, selling everything from homemade preserves to handcrafted items. Music from a small band filled the air, and children darted between adults, their laughter carrying on the breeze. As Thomas's wagon approached, Nizhoni felt her stomach tighten with nervousness. True to his word, Thomas stayed close beside her. As they moved through the crowd, some people nodded politely, others looked away, and a few stared openly. "Mr. Blackwood," the mayor greeted them, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed Nizhoni. "I see you've brought your ward." "Yes, Mayor Patterson. This is Nizhoni. She's been living at the ranch since her mother passed in the summer." The mayor cleared his throat. "Yes, well, quite charitable of you. Enjoy the festival." He moved away quickly, clearly uncomfortable. Nizhoni pretended not to notice, though the interaction stung. Thomas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Pay him no mind," he said quietly. "Some people's hearts take longer to open. Come, let's find something sweet to eat." They were examining a display of candied apples when a group of children around Nizhoni's age approached, curiosity evident in their expressions. "Is she really an Indian?" one boy asked Thomas bluntly, as if Nizhoni couldn't understand. Before Thomas could respond, Nizhoni spoke up. "I am Apache," she said clearly. "And I can speak for myself." The children looked startled. Then a girl with blonde braids stepped forward. "Can you really make baskets?" "My maya says Indian baskets are worth good money." "I can," Nizhoni replied. "My mother taught me. Each basket tells a story. What kind of stories? Another child asked, genuine interest replacing the initial wariness. Stories. Of the land, of animals, of how the world came to be, Nizhoni explained. Would you like to hear one? The children nodded, forming a small circle around her. Thomas stepped back, watching with pride as Nizhoni began to tell a traditional Apache tale about how the coyote brought fire to the people. Her voice, initially soft, grew stronger as she wove the story, her hands gesturing to illustrate the narrative. By the time she finished, several adults had also gathered to listen. There was a moment of appreciative silence before the blonde girl spoke again. That was better than the stories our teacher reads us, she declared. I'm Alice. Do you want to play ring toss with us? A tentative smile spread across Nizhoni's face. I would like that. Thomas watched as the children moved toward the games area, Nizhoni walking alongside them with newfound confidence. You've done well by her, a voice said beside him. Thomas turned to see Mrs. Henderson, the town school teacher. She's done well by herself, Thomas corrected. She has her mother's strength, Mrs. Henderson nodded. Has she had any schooling? Her mother taught her some English and figures. I've been continuing as best I can in the evenings. Perhaps, Mrs. Henderson suggested carefully, she might benefit from attending school. We have a few other children from the reservation who come in when their families are settled nearby. Thomas watched Nizhoni successfully toss a ring over a bottle, her laugh joining those of the other children. I'll discuss it with her, he promised. It would be her decision. Later, as they shared a meal of festival food at one of the communal tables, Nizhoni recounted her experiences with animation that Thomas hadn't seen before. Alice has invited me to visit her farm sometime, she said between bites of roasted corn. Her father raises sheep. And Mrs. Henderson said, I have a good speaking voice. She asked if I would come to school. Would you like that? Thomas asked. To attend school? Nizhoni considered the question seriously. My mother wanted me to learn the ways of both worlds. She said knowledge gives choices. She looked up at Thomas, but I would still keep my Apache ways? Always, Thomas assured her. That was my promise, remember? School would just be one more strand in your basket. Nizhoni smiled at the metaphor. Then yes, I think I would like to try. As the sun began to set, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a warm glow over the festivities. The band struck up a lively tune, and couples began to dance. Look at Miguel and Elena, Nizhoni pointed out, spotting the couple joining. The dancers, their movements displaying years of partnership. Thomas watched them with a wistful smile. They've been dancing together for 30 years. Did you dance with your wife? Nizhoni asked softly. A shadow of old grief passed over Thomas's face, but it was gentler now, tempered by time and healing. Yes, Catherine loved to dance. Said it made her feel like she was flying. Nizhoni stood suddenly, holding out her hand. Then you should dance again. My mother said we honor those who have gone before by living fully. Thomas looked at her outstretched hand, surprise giving way to gratitude. Your mother was very wise, he said, rising to his feet. I'm not sure I remember all the steps. That's all right, Nizhoni assured him with unexpected maturity. We can learn together. Winter descended on the Arizona territory, bringing crisp mornings and early evenings. The landscape transformed under occasional dustings of snow that never lasted long but changed the familiar contours of the ranch into something magical and new. Inside the Blackwood home, the fireplace burned steadily, casting a warm glow over the main room where Thomas and Nizhoni had established an evening routine. Nizhoni had been attending school for almost 2 months now, riding in with Thomas 3 days a week when he had business in town. Despite initial wariness from some parents, Mrs. Henderson had welcomed her warmly, and several children, including Alice with the blonde braids, had become friendly companions. Show me what you learned today, Thomas said, clearing space at the kitchen table as Nizhoni pulled out her slate and chalk. "Mrs. Henderson is teaching us about the different states," Nizhoni explained, carefully drawing a rough map of the United States. "She says that Arizona might become a state soon, but not yet." Thomas nodded, watching as she labeled various territories and states with increasing confidence. Her English, already good when she arrived, had become more fluent, though she and Thomas still practiced Apache words together in the evenings, his clumsy attempts often making her laugh. "You're making fine progress," he commented as she completed her map. "Your mother would be proud." A small smile touched Nizhoni's face at the mention of her mother. The raw grief had softened over the months, transforming into a gentle ache. That came and went like the weather. "I still miss her," she admitted quietly. "You always will," Thomas replied, his voice holding the wisdom of his own losses. "But missing someone doesn't mean you can't find joy too. The heart has room for both." Nizhoni nodded, understanding more than many children her age might. She had been writing in the journal Thomas gave her, recording not only her mother's stories, but also her own experiences and feelings as she navigated her new life. "I was thinking," Thomas said, changing the subject to brighter matters. "Christmas is coming in a few weeks. We usually have a small celebration here, nothing extravagant. But Elena makes special foods, and we exchange simple gifts. Christmas." Nizhoni repeated thoughtfully. "Some of the children at school talk about it. They say there's a tree inside the house with candles on it." Thomas smiled at her curious expression. "That's right. Would you like to help choose a tree this year? Miguel knows the best spots in the foothills where the pines grow." Excitement flickered in Nizhoni's dark eyes. "Yes, I would like that." The following Saturday, Thomas, Miguel, and Nizhoni rode out to the pine-covered slopes that marked the edge of Thomas's property. The air was cold and crisp, their breath forming small clouds that dissipated in the winter sunshine. Nizhoni rode her own pony, now a gentle mare named Willow that Thomas had purchased from a neighboring ranch in November. "A girl needs her own horse," he had explained when presenting the surprised Nizhoni with the pony, "especially one who's becoming such a fine rider." Now as they trotted through scattered pine trees, Nizhoni sat confidently in her saddle, her eyes scanning the landscape. "What about that one?" She pointed to a symmetrical pine of medium height. Thomas rode closer to inspect it. "Good eye, it's just the right size for the house." As Miguel dismounted to cut the tree, Nizhoni noticed something. Nestled at its base, a cluster of evergreen plants with bright red berries. "What are these?" she asked, sliding from her pony to examine them. "That's mistletoe," Thomas explained, dismounting beside her. "Some people hang it in their homes at Christmas. There's an old tradition that if two people stand beneath it, they're supposed to." He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "Well, it's just a silly custom." "What custom?" Nizhoni persisted. "They're supposed to kiss," Miguel answered with a grin as he worked on cutting the tree. "It brings good luck for the coming year." Nizhoni considered this information seriously. "Did you and your wife hang mistletoe?" "Ah." Soft smile crossed Thomas's face at the memory. "Yes, Catherine loved all the Christmas traditions. She would decorate every corner of the house." Nizhoni carefully gathered some of the mistletoe, wrapping it in her scarf. "Then we should hang it too, to remember her." Thomas's eyes grew suspiciously bright in the winter sunlight. "I think she would like that very much." The days leading up to Christmas were filled with preparations. Elena taught Nizhoni how to make traditional Mexican Christmas wreaths while Thomas brought down a box of ornaments from the attic, treasured decorations that had remained packed away since the loss of his family. "These angels were Catherine's favorites," he explained, unwrapping delicate glass figurines from tissue paper. "And this star ... Sarah made it when she was about your age." Nizhoni handled each item with reverence, understanding their significance. "We will put them in special places," she promised. On Christmas Eve, the small household gathered in the main room. The pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with the family ornaments alongside new additions that Nizhoni had made at school paper. Stars and painted pine cones. Candles glowed in holders clipped carefully to the branches, their light reflecting in the window glass. Elena had outdone herself with the meal, a feast that combined traditional American Christmas dishes with Mexican specialties and even some Apache elements that Nizhoni had helped prepare, using dried berries and nuts gathered in the autumn. "Before we eat," Thomas said, standing at the head of the table, "I have something I'd like to say." He looked around at the small gathering, Elena and Miguel seated together, and Nizhoni watching him with curious eyes. "This past year has brought changes I never expected," he continued, his voice steady but emotional. "When I lost Catherine and Sarah, I thought that part of my life, the family part, was over forever." He looked directly at Nizhoni now. "I was wrong. Family isn't just who we're born to. It's also who comes into our lives when we need them most." Nizhoni's eyes widened slightly as she understood the deeper meaning behind his words. "Nizhoni," Thomas said gently, "these past months have shown me what a remarkable young person you are. Brave, intelligent, and kind, just like your mother." He took a deep breath. "I've grown to care for you as if you were my own daughter. I know I can never replace your parents, nor would I want to. But I wanted to ask if you would consider making our arrangement permanent, if you would allow me to legally adopt you." A hush fell over the room. Elena dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief while Miguel nodded approvingly. Nizhoni sat very still, processing Thomas's words. "This doesn't mean forgetting who you are or where you came from," Thomas hastened to add. "You would still be Nizhoni of the Apache people. You would still honor your mother's memory and keep your traditions. But you would also be a Blackwood, with all the protection and opportunities that provides." Nizhoni looked down at her hands for a long moment, then raised her eyes to meet Thomas's anxious gaze. "My mother once told me that the Great Spirit places people in our paths for reasons we might not understand at first," she said slowly. "I think she would be happy knowing I found a new father who respects who I am." A smile spread across her face. "Yes, I would like to be your daughter." The tension in Thomas's shoulders released, and genuine joy brightened his weathered features. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of all he felt. Elena wiped away tears of happiness while Miguel raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he declared. "The ones we're born with, and the ones we find." After the meal, as they sat by the fire enjoying Elena's sweet bread, Nizhoni slipped away briefly and returned with a small package wrapped in a piece of decorated hide. "I made this for you," she said, presenting it to Thomas, "for Christmas." Thomas carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a small, intricately woven basket. Unlike her mother's traditional designs, this one told a new story. Figures representing Thomas and Nizhoni stood on opposite sides of a dwelling, with a path connecting them. "It's beautiful," Thomas said, genuinely moved. "What story does it tell?" "It shows how two different paths can join," Nizhoni explained. "The Apache symbol here means family chosen by heart." Thomas gently set the basket aside and reached for a package wrapped in brown paper. "I have something for you too." Nizhoni unwrapped the gift to find a wooden box, beautifully carved with Apache symbols alongside roses, her mother's favorite flower, as she had once mentioned to Thomas. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a silver locket. When Nizhoni carefully opened it, she found a tiny photograph on one side, her mother, smiling, from a picture Thomas had commissioned from a traveling photographer who had visited their settlement the previous year. "The other side is empty," Thomas explained. "I thought perhaps we could have a photograph taken of the two of us to place there. That way, you carry both families with you always." Tears welled in Nizhoni's eyes as she clutched the locket. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the emotions swelling in her heart. Later that night, as Thomas tucked her into bed, a ritual that had evolved naturally over the months. Nizhoni pointed to the small sprig of mistletoe she had hung from her bedpost. Elena helped me put it there, she explained, so my mother and your Catherine and Sarah could send us Christmas kisses while we sleep. Thomas smiled at the innocent wisdom of her reasoning. That's a wonderful thought, he said, leaning down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Good night, my daughter. Good night. Father, Nizhoni replied, testing the new word and finding it felt right. Outside, stars scattered across the Arizona sky like bright beads on indigo cloth. Inside the Blackwood home, the embers of the fire glowed warm and steady, much like the new bond that had formed between a lonely rancher and an Apache girl who had found, in each other, the family they both needed.